So what happens when you pull the fire alarm in a building? Of course, there's the obvious stuff like horns, strobes, and bells sounding. And if you're really paying attention, you might also notice that doors close automatically. But there's tons of things that happen in the background that you most likely never have noticed that play a very crucial part in protecting the building itself and the occupants in it from a fire. So now all of those fire alarm pull stations may have looked different, but they all do the same thing. So when you pull a fire alarm pull station, how does that actually make horns and strobes go off? And now the pull station itself doesn't actually do that. A fire alarm control panel like what you're seeing right here is what does that. It's basically the brains of the system, and if it sees that a pull station has been pulled, it'll make the horns and strobes go off, and the other stuff that we'll get into later activate and change states. Here's what a fire alarm pull station looks like. It is a very simple device, and internally what it does is it is basically like a switch. It can disconnect and connect two wires together. Normally when it's not pulled, the wires are not touching, and basically once you've pulled it, it connects those wires together inside. Basically all the panel is looking for is a closed circuit, where two wires that normally are not connected together become connected together. In this pull station right now, the wires are looking like this, and once you pull it, they are connected together like that. So once said pull station is pulled, the panel does a few different things. So now at this point, the fire alarm control panel and the whole system would be in what's considered alarm. That's the point that the fire alarms have been activated and the system is sounding the devices, and as you can see on the screen, it says alarm pull station, meaning that a pull station has been pulled. So now that the system is in alarm, not much new is going to happen. The system basically has two states: standby and alarm. Of course, there's other ones like trouble, supervisory, pre-alarm, that sort of stuff, but that's beyond this video. Not sure if you heard it, but I'll replay the video over again. Just a little brief moment that's important. You could hear a click, and that is the sound of relays in the fire alarm control panel changing state. And those relays change contactors, which make big things happen. So hopefully you were able to hear the relays click. And in that little split second that those relays clicked, a whole bunch of different things happened. That's when pretty much all of the changes happen when the fire alarm system goes into alarm. So now, since a whole bunch of stuff just happened at the same time, I'm going to be listing it off from what is most obvious to what you probably would very rarely notice, if you notice it at all. And first we're going to start off with the horns and strobes, or audible visual devices. Next off, the door holders let go of the fire doors. These are strong magnets that hold the door open, and once they lose power through the relays opening, the door will begin to close. These are to help stop the spread of fire and smoke throughout the building, to try and contain the fire to one zone or area of the building. Now, what's the point of having fire doors shut if there's still forced air systems pushing air around the building? That's why they're on contactors that shut them down in the event of a fire alarm, so they won't move air through. Next, we have fire dampers. They're kind of like mini fire doors used to portion off separate sections of the building. Here is a small fire damper that you can see is installed in a concrete wall, and is to separate sections of a crawl space for the same reasons that fire doors exist in corridors, to stop smoke and fire spread throughout the building. Next is elevator recall. And I don't actually have any clips on how elevator recall works, and I don't actually know how to really explain it, because it is kind of confusing. Basically, the elevator works differently in the event of a fire alarm and does not go about its normal day when a fire alarm is active. But elevator recall does not exist in all buildings. In fact, I've never actually seen it in person being used because all the smaller buildings in my area don't actually use it. The elevators go about their normal day completely ignoring the fire alarm. There is no connection from the fire alarm system to the elevators to change the way they operate. Next is contacting the fire department to let them know that there is a fire alarm active in the building. Now, sometimes that is right to the fire department, and sometimes it is through a monitoring company. But either way, it's done through two phone lines, a primary and a secondary. In case one fails, there's always a backup because it's one of the most important parts of a fire alarm system. Common in my area is they won't actually contact fire department directly. They will normally go to a monitoring company first, and where I am, they don't actually normally have their dedicated line to that. They normally contact that through the security system that then contacts the monitoring company, which I do see a couple of flaws with doing it that way, which I have actually seen in person and been the one that has actually called in the real fire alarm that was never called in. But that's a subject for another day because that could make its own video because that was a kind of fun night. Another way that the fire alarm system is connected to other things is access control. Buildings that have interior access control, such as hospitals with magnetic locking doors, will be connected to a fire alarm system most likely, so that when the fire alarm gets activated in the building, the access control system through dry contacts will recognize that fire alarm and open up the doors that would normally be locked, normally on the interior of the building. Now, whether those doors are locking through magnets or electronic strike plates or any other type of locking mechanism, they would normally be unlocked so that people can get out of the building in the case of a fire. So now the whole door would not be opening, just the locking mechanism would let go of keeping the door shut. Basically, you could open the door by hand and not need an access card or a password to get through the door. So as I said, the door is not actually opening up wide, it's just unlocking so you can open it up, and there would most likely be a door closer on there to close the door behind you because fire doors like that will require that. Not very often, but sometimes exit signs can also, believe it or not, be tied into the fire alarm system, where normally they'd be on solid, but can actually start to flash in the event that the fire alarms go off. Same with emergency lighting. You can have it so emergency lighting can come on some very few emergency lights. That is a possibility to have a wire on them that is meant to go through a relay on a fire alarm, so therefore the lights can come on and I guess provide a little bit extra illumination when the fire alarm is active. Anyways, guys, I have just briefly touched the surface of how fire alarm system works. I've barely got into it, believe it or not. But hopefully you guys have still learned something on what all happens when a fire alarm pull station is pulled. There's lots of things behind the scenes that happen whenever you pull a fire alarm pull station. And now, never pull a fire alarm if there is not an actual fire. I should have mentioned that by now. All those clips of me pulling pull stations, those were during fire alarm testing or drills. So unless there's a real emergency, don't do it because you'll get fined quite a bit if you get caught pulling a fire alarm pull station maliciously. Anyways, guys, like I said, I hope you learned something. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to hit the thumbs up button, and if you haven't already, make sure to subscribe. Any comments or questions, leave those down in the comment section below. Thanks for watching.